Every day, your dog does things that seem completely random: tilting their head, spinning in circles before lying down, digging at a blanket as if they're trying to bury something that isn't even there, rolling in something that smells absolutely terrible, suddenly racing around the house after a bath, walking straight up to another dog, only to sniff the one place we'd never choose to start a conversation. Maybe you've laughed at these moments. Maybe you've recorded them on your phone. Maybe you've even called your dog a little weird. And if we're honest, most of us have. After all, these behaviors don't seem logical. They don't seem useful. Sometimes they don't seem to have any reason at all. But what if we've been asking the wrong question? What if the real question isn't, why is my dog so strange? What if it's, why does this make perfect sense to a dog? Because that's the surprising truth. Almost none of these behaviors are random. Some are ancient instincts that have survived for thousands of years. Some help dogs understand the world around them, some help them communicate, some help them feel safe. And once you understand the purpose behind them, they stop looking strange altogether. While researching this topic, I realized something I wasn't expecting. There were far more fascinating dog behaviors than anyone could possibly fit into a single video. Every time I thought I had reached the end of the list, I found another habit shared by millions of dogs around the world. That's why this is part one of a special series. Today, we'll explore some of the strange behaviors almost every dog owner has seen. In the next videos, we'll uncover even more surprising habits, including some that most owners completely misunderstand, and a few that can actually tell us when something isn't quite right. By the end of today's video, you won't just recognize these behaviors, you'll understand them. And once you do, you may never look at your dog the same way again. Let's begin with one of the most recognizable things dogs do: the famous head tilt. You've probably seen it dozens of times. You say your dog's name, ask, do you want to go for a walk? Or reach for their favorite toy. And suddenly their head slowly leans to one side, sometimes only a little, sometimes almost 45 degrees. It's so charming that many owners intentionally try to make it happen again. People smile, they laugh, they grab their phones to record it. It's easy to assume dogs have learned that tilting their heads gets attention, and perhaps some dogs eventually do notice our reactions. But that probably isn't where the behavior begins. A much more interesting possibility is that your dog is trying to understand you more clearly. You may think for a moment about everything your dog is processing while you're speaking. They're listening to your words, but they aren't focused on words alone. They're listening to your tone of voice, watching your facial expression, following your body language, paying attention to your eyes, even noticing the direction you're looking. All of those signals arrive at the same time, and your dog is trying to turn them into one clear message. Researchers are still studying exactly why dogs tilt their heads, and there isn't one explanation that fits every situation. But one particularly interesting study noticed something that caught researchers by surprise. The study involved dogs that had learned the names of many different toys. When those dogs heard the name of a familiar toy, they frequently tilted their heads before choosing it. The researchers suggested that, at least for these dogs, the head tilt might be connected to processing meaningful information rather than simply reacting to a sound. That doesn't mean every head tilt has the same cause. Sometimes your dog may be trying to hear something more clearly. Sometimes changing the angle of the head may help them see your face better, especially in dogs with longer muzzles. And sometimes they may simply be concentrating. The important thing isn't finding one explanation that fits every dog. What matters is realizing that this little movement is usually serving a purpose. Your dog may be working surprisingly hard to understand what you're trying to communicate. What looks like an adorable little habit may actually be a sign of careful attention. And suddenly, the behavior doesn't seem quite so mysterious anymore. It becomes another reminder that your dog is constantly trying to understand your world. In May, what's fascinating is that this isn't the only everyday behavior with surprisingly deep roots. In fact, the next habit has been quietly traveling through canine evolution for thousands of years. Have you ever noticed that your dog almost never lies down immediately? Instead, they take one slow turn, then another. sometimes even a third. They pause, adjust their position, look around, and only then do they finally curl up and close their eyes. It's such an ordinary part of a dog's routine that most owners barely notice it. But imagine watching it for the very first time. It would seem like a very strange way to go to bed. After all, the bed hasn't moved. The blanket is still exactly where it was a few seconds ago. Nothing has changed. So why not simply lie down? To understand this habit, we have to imagine a world without dog beds, without heated homes, and without people. Long before dogs slept beside us, their ancestors had to choose resting places very carefully. Tall grass often needed to be flattened. Loose snow could be packed down. Sharp sticks or stones had to be pushed aside. And perhaps most importantly, the area had to be checked before becoming vulnerable enough to fall asleep. Walking in circles was part of preparing that resting place. It wasn't wasted movement. It increased comfort, it reduced risk, and it helped create a place that felt safe enough to rest. Today's dogs no longer need to prepare a patch of grass before going to sleep, yet evolution rarely throws useful behaviors away overnight. Sometimes it simply carries them into a completely different world. That's why your dog may carefully circle a soft orthopedic bed or even your living room couch, as though they're still preparing a place out in the wild. From our perspective, nothing needs adjusting. From your dog's perspective, the routine itself may still be part of settling down. But there's another lesson hidden inside this simple little routine, one that becomes more important the more you understand dogs. Context changes everything. A dog who calmly turns once or twice before lying down is behaving in a way that's considered completely normal. But imagine the same behavior looking different. Your dog circles, then circles again, lies down, stands back up, circles once more, and still can't seem to settle. Or perhaps they've never done this before, and suddenly it becomes part of every evening. Now, the behavior tells a different story. Not because circling itself is dangerous, but because the pattern has changed. Sometimes repeated circling before resting can be associated with pain, joint discomfort, anxiety, or cognitive changes in older dogs. The circles themselves aren't the warning. The sudden change is, and that may be one of the most valuable ideas in this entire series. Don't ask only, what is my dog doing? Also ask, is this how my dog has always done it? Dogs communicate through patterns. The pattern often matters more than the behavior itself. Once you begin looking at behavior this way, you'll notice things you never noticed before. And those little circles before bedtime stop looking strange. Instead, they become another quiet reminder that your dog still carries pieces of an ancient survival strategy into your living room every single day. We've already explored two completely different behaviors. One helps dogs understand the world around them. The other comes from instincts that have survived for thousands of years. Different behaviors, different purposes, yet they share one remarkable thing. Neither is random. Both solve a problem from a dog's point of view. And once you begin looking for purpose instead of randomness, an entirely new picture starts to appear. Speaking of ancient instincts, there's another habit that leaves many owners completely puzzled. You give your dog a favorite chew or a large bone. Instead of enjoying it immediately, they pick it up, walk into another room, look around carefully, and begin scratching at the floor. They paw at a blanket, push their nose against a pillow. Sometimes they spend nearly a minute trying to cover the treat, even though there isn't a single handful of dirt anywhere nearby. Then they quietly walk away. The chew is still visible. Nothing has actually been buried. Yet your dog seems perfectly satisfied. From our point of view, the whole ritual feels unnecessary. The food isn't hidden. No other dog is waiting to steal it. And your dog could have finished eating it long ago. So why spend so much time pretending to bury something that clearly isn't buried? Once again, the answer begins thousands of years ago. For wild canids, food was never guaranteed. Some days were successful, others were not. Finding more food than they could eat at one time was an opportunity too valuable to waste. Instead of leaving the extra food where another animal might discover it, they often hid it for later. Behavior scientists call this food caching. It's a survival strategy found in many different species. Foxes do it, wolves do it, many birds do it. Even squirrels rely on the same basic idea. Save something valuable today, so it may still be there tomorrow. Modern dogs no longer need to worry about hunting for every meal. Most know that breakfast and dinner arrive with remarkable reliability, but evolution doesn't erase useful behaviors simply because life becomes easier. Some instincts remain, quietly appearing in situations where they no longer seem necessary. That's why your dog may carefully bury a chew beneath a blanket, hide a bone under a pillow, or push imaginary dirt over a favorite treat lying in the middle of your living room. From our perspective, nothing has changed. From your dog's perspective, they may simply be protecting something valuable. You may even notice that dogs don't do this with every piece of food. A few pieces of kibble usually disappear immediately, but a favorite chew, a marrow bone, or a particularly valuable reward is much more likely to become part of this little ritual. The more valuable the reward feels, the stronger the instinct may become. Some owners worry that hiding food means their dog doesn't trust them. In most cases, that's probably not what's happening. Your dog isn't planning for a future where you suddenly stop feeding them. They're following an ancient survival strategy that once helped their ancestors stay alive. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part. An instinct that once protected wild animals from starvation can still appear today on a soft blanket inside a warm home, shared with a family that has never missed a single meal. It's one more reminder that evolution leaves remarkably long fingerprints on behavior. And the more you recognize those fingerprints, you know, the easier it becomes to understand why dogs sometimes behave in ways that seem completely irrational to us. Of course, context matters here as well. Occasionally, hiding a favorite treat is completely normal, but if your dog suddenly begins hiding nearly every meal, loses interest in eating, or shows other unusual changes around food, the behavior deserves a closer look. Not because hiding food itself is dangerous, but because sudden changes in normal behavior are always worth paying attention to. Now let's move from one of the oldest instincts dogs still carry to one of the habits owners find the hardest to understand. Your dog has just finished a bath. Their coat is clean, they smell fresh. You dry them off, open the bathroom door, and within seconds, they explode into motion. They sprint across the living room, leap onto the couch, throw themselves onto the carpet, roll from side to side, race down the hallway, turn sharply, and suddenly your calm, well behaved dog looks as though they've completely forgotten how to walk. Most owners simply laugh and say, "Here come the zoomies." And honestly, it's hard not to smile. But behind all that excitement is another reminder that dogs experience the world very differently from we do. Think about everything your dog has just experienced: the sound of running water, hands moving across their body, a slippery surface beneath their feet, the feeling of being completely soaked, the unfamiliar scent of shampoo. Even dogs that remain perfectly calm during a bath are processing an enormous amount of sensory information. By the time it's over, their body has experienced something very different from an ordinary day. Now, all of that energy has to go somewhere. Running, rolling, twisting, jumping. Those sudden bursts of movement may simply be one way dogs release built up excitement and return to a more comfortable emotional state. You may have noticed something similar in people. After sitting through a long meeting, someone stretches. After finishing a difficult exam, they take a deep breath. Uh, After holding still for a long time, the body naturally wants to move again. Dogs may be doing something remarkably similar. Movement helps them reset. But there may be another reason hidden inside those famous post bath zoomies. To us, a freshly bathed dog smells wonderful, clean, fresh, pleasant. To your dog, they may smell surprisingly unfamiliar. Dogs rely on scent far more than we do. Their own scent is part of how they experience themselves and the world around them. After a bath, that familiar scent has changed. One of the first things many dogs do is roll across the carpet, rub against the couch, or wriggle over their favorite blanket. Those places are filled with scents they recognize: their own, their families, their home. By rubbing against them, they may simply be surrounding themselves with smells that feel familiar again. Researchers don't believe there's one explanation that fits every dog. Some dogs may mostly be releasing excitement, others may be trying to dry themselves. Some may be reacting to the unfamiliar smell of shampoo, and many are probably experiencing several of those things at the same time. The important point is that these joyful explosions of energy are usually completely normal, unless your dog appears distressed or the behavior suddenly changes in a dramatic way. Those post-bath zoomies are usually nothing to worry about. In fact, once you understand what may be happening, they stop looking like complete chaos. Instead, they become another reminder that dogs experience the world through a very different set of senses. And perhaps nowhere is that difference more obvious than the way dogs greet one another. Up until now, every behavior we've explored has been about your dog's relationship with their environment, understanding us, preparing a safe place to rest, protecting valuable food, returning to a familiar emotional state. The next behavior is different. It isn't about the environment, it's about communication. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. You'd probably look at their face, listen to their voice, shake their hand, exchange names. Dogs begin the conversation somewhere completely different. The moment two unfamiliar dogs meet, they often head straight toward each other's back end. To us, it can look awkward, sometimes even embarrassing. Many owners instinctively pull their dogs away after only a second or two. But from a dog's perspective, this may be one of the most important conversations they'll have all day. Humans gather information primarily through sight and sound. Dogs gather information primarily through scent. Around a dog's anal area are glands that produce a unique chemical scent signature. Research suggests these secretions play an important role in chemical communication between dogs. Those scents can provide another dog with an extraordinary amount of information, not in the form of words, but through chemistry. A dog may learn whether they've met this individual before, whether it's male or female, young or old. They may even gather clues about reproductive status or emotional condition. It's a conversation taking place entirely through smell. That's why what seems like just sniffing to us is actually careful investigation. Some dogs finish quickly, others spend several seconds collecting information we can't even begin to detect. And every now and then, after smelling something especially interesting, you may notice another behavior that's just as unusual. Your dog suddenly pauses. Their mouth opens slightly, their lips quiver, their jaw makes tiny chattering movements. For a few seconds, they seem completely absorbed by whatever they've just smelled. This is known as the Flehmen response. It isn't unique to dogs. Cats, horses, goats, and many other mammals display similar behavior. During the Flehmen response, scent molecules are directed toward a specialized sensory structure called the vomeronasal organ, sometimes known as Jacobson's organ. This system helps animals analyze certain chemical signals, especially pheromones, in greater detail. In other words, your dog isn't being rude. They're using one of the most sophisticated sensory systems evolution has ever created. What looks like an awkward social habit is actually an incredibly advanced form of communication. And once you understand that, a simple greeting between two dogs suddenly becomes far more remarkable than strange. And if you've noticed one thing while watching this video, it's probably this. None of these behaviors happen for the reasons most people imagine. A head tilt isn't simply a cute pose. Those little circles before bedtime aren't a meaningless habit. Burying a favorite chew isn't your dog pretending to be a wolf. Zoomies after a bath aren't a sign that your dog has suddenly gone crazy. And sniffing another dog's back end certainly isn't bad manners. Every one of these behaviors has something in common. Each one solves a problem from your dog's perspective. Sometimes that problem comes from instincts that have survived for thousands of years. Sometimes it's about gathering information. Sometimes it's about communication. Sometimes it's about restoring a sense of familiarity. The behavior changes, but the purpose remains. And perhaps that's the biggest shift we can make as dog owners. Instead of asking, why is my dog acting so weird? We begin asking, what might my dog be trying to accomplish? It's a surprisingly simple question, but it changes everything. Because once you stop looking for human logic and start looking for dog logic, their behavior begins to feel remarkably consistent. You stop seeing random habits. You start seeing thoughtful responses to the world around them. And perhaps that's why understanding dogs becomes so rewarding. The more you understand how they experience the world, the more predictable their behavior becomes. Not because dogs become less fascinating, but because you're finally learning to see the world through their eyes instead of your own. One lesson has quietly appeared again and again throughout today's video. Context matters. A behavior that has always been part of your dog's routine is often completely normal. But when that same behavior suddenly becomes much more frequent, much more intense, or appears alongside other unusual changes, it's worth paying attention. Dogs rarely communicate with words, they communicate through patterns. That's why noticing change is often more valuable than noticing the behavior itself. A dog who has always circled twice before lying down is very different from a dog who suddenly can't stop circling. A dog who occasionally hides a favorite chew is very different from one who suddenly refuses to eat and hides every meal. The same behavior can tell two very different stories. The difference is almost always found in the context. Maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Maybe dogs were never behaving strangely. Maybe they were communicating in a language we simply hadn't learned to understand yet. And once you begin learning that language, you realize something remarkable. Your dog has been explaining their world to you every single day. Not with words, not with commands, but with small behaviors that quietly reveal how they think, what they notice, what they value, and how they experience life beside us. We've only explored a handful of those behaviors today. While researching this topic, I discovered many more fascinating habits than could ever fit into a single video. Some of the most surprising ones are still waiting. Why do some dogs circle before going to the bathroom? Why do some dogs investigate scent marks for so long? Why do certain hunting instincts still appear in dogs that have never hunted a single day in their lives? Those are just a few of the behaviors we'll explore next, and I have a feeling some of them will surprise you even more than the ones you've seen today. Until then, watch your dog a little more closely. You may discover that those strange little habits you've seen for years were never really strange at all. They've been quietly telling you the story of how your dog experiences the world. You just needed to know how to listen.